Well, welcome One Life East, West, and Henderson. So this past week, I'm at a prayer team meeting. We have a prayer team. I don't know how many of you know this, but after all of our services, we have a group of people at all of our campuses who want to pray with you. And if you want to have prayer for anything, please feel free to approach them. So we're meeting together, just kind of walking through some things about the future and all that. And we have a new young man join us. And I knew his story, but I had him kind of thumbnail sketch his story for that group of people. And it's pretty amazing because he is from the east end of Henderson. It's kind of where he grew up. And the east end of Henderson is an under-resourced neighborhood, kind of had high crime rates and all that sort of thing that we've been a part of developing for the last several years. Well, he's from there, and he was a drug dealer. He talked about standing on the corner and literally dealing drugs in that neighborhood. Well, he came to a place of experiencing Jesus and following him, and his life is absolutely revolutionized to the point where he's there at a prayer team meeting. Life completely turned around. But he said the main corner he used to stand on is now the corner where there's the thing called the Audubon Kids Zone. And the Audubon Kids Zone is where One-Lifers and other partners in Henderson have been developing that neighborhood. It's an after-school program that is now up and running and doing really, really, really well. Now, I say that for a couple reasons. First of all, to let you know that whenever we say we don't want to build just great churches, we want to build great cities, that stuff is really, truly happening. The other reason that struck me was we always have to remember, as we talk about reaching people far from God, it really does happen. And people are completely transformed. I guarantee you, there were people a few years ago that saw that young man standing on the corner. They considered him hopeless, almost like an enemy of society. And Jesus got a hold of his life, and now he's transformed. Now, I want you to remember that, because one of the things I've asked us all to do, I'm asking myself to do this, is coming up on July 23rd, we are doing a special service that's devoted completely to talking to people in our lives that don't believe this stuff. Maybe those hopeless cases. And guys, it doesn't have to be a drug dealer. Sometimes our bosses, very successful people, are on the wrong road, or they don't know Christ, and they're pushing this kind of stuff aside. And we're asking everybody to think of one person in our lives that we could bring on that day, and we're going to devote the entire service to trying to persuade them that Jesus really ought to be followed and can be believed in. And his life and his death and his resurrection really, truly can change your life. So that's what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to ask us all to be thinking that one person. And before I go any further today, I'd like to pray. I want to say a word of prayer just about that whole thing, that we'll all have someone come to mind and that will get in the business of helping people far from God. So pray with me across all sides. Father, in Jesus' name, thank you for life and goodness. Thank you for that young man's story. Thank you that you are in the business of revolutionizing people's lives in all kinds of ways. People who are in the drug dealing world and people who have never been in that kind of thing but need purpose and need meaning and need forgiveness and hope. And so I pray at One Life, for those of us that call ourselves One-Lifers, that you will fan the flame of our passion for and our desire to help people who are genuinely far from you to get to know you for real. And I ask that you'll do that work in our hearts, show us people in our lives that we can invite and we can have there that day. We love you. We thank you for all you do. In Jesus' name, amen. Another thing I asked everybody to do over the summer is, as a part of this playlist series, we're talking about music, but we're studying the Psalms. And I said, listen, if you want to do something that's virtually a guarantee that will stretch you, help you, inspire you to what we call extravagant worship around here, it is to pray the Psalms. As we study the Psalms on Sunday morning, I'm asking you to pray them. Actually, literally make them your prayers. You go through that exercise and really take it seriously and really pay attention. I guarantee you it will shape you in ways that you had never anticipated or grow you in your relationship with Jesus, all right? But what I didn't warn you about is that practice, while it's awesome and wonderful and amazing, can also create a problem. And here's the problem. What you can do, okay, just imagine there are people out there that say, all right, I'll pray the Psalms. I'll do what the pastor says. You open up to Psalm chapter 1, just start there. I'm going to make this my prayer. You go through, it's kind of talking about God more than to God, but okay, that's good. You go to Psalm number 2. And it talks about the nations and rulers and stuff, which is probably not something you usually pray about. So you do that, you're fine. You come to Psalm chapter 3, and it's a little bit more personal. It sounds more like a prayer. But then it says in Psalm 3, 7 and 8, coming out of your mouth, if you're making it your prayer, it says to God, arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. We're tracking there. For you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord, your blessing be on your people. Isn't that an interesting line? Just to kind of be praying along and all of a sudden you're saying, break the teeth of the wicked. Okay, anytime I read that verse, I have to admit, this goes back several years now, the movie Braveheart. I always think of that one because it's about, they show these very graphic medieval battle scenes where they're swinging axes and those handles that had the big metal ball on the end and they're knocking people upside the head. And there's one where it hits a guy and his teeth go poof. I always think of that scene when I thought, I'm praying this stuff? That creates a little bit of a problem, unless you really do want that to happen to somebody. Maybe some of you are like, okay, yeah, I can think of people I would love for God to break the teeth of the wicked. Now the problem is, though, is that you will see that kind of thing again and again and again in the Psalms. They pray that way. They ask God to get people, to do things to people, to hit people, basically. And that creates a little bit of a dilemma and a messing with your mind moment, because we all know that Jesus is the one who said things like, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. If someone hits you on one cheek, turn to him the other also. If he forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. He's the one that said that. I thought we were supposed to love people. Why are we praying that God would hurt people? And that should kind of run us into a dilemma. But what you've done is you've run into, I'm going to give you kind of $1 million word that you can use at parties, and if you didn't learn anything else today, you've run into the problem of what theologians and scholars call the imprecatory Psalms. Imprecatory is defined this way in the dictionary. To imprecate means it's a verb used to invoke or call down evil or curses upon a person. In other words, they pray along and I curse be upon so-and-so. Almost sounds like you're doing voodoo or something, kind of this weird thing. And there are Psalms, and it's not just a little anomaly in Psalm 3. There's a pattern, there's like a thread that you'll encounter these a lot. Let me give you another example. I could give you lots of them. I'm going to read Psalm 35, 1 through 11. You can hear one that's a little bit more in depth. This guy really gets going. Contend, O Lord, with those who contend with me. Fight against those who fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler and rise for my help. He's telling God to take up weapons. Draw the spear and the javelin against my pursuers. God, pick up some weapons and run somebody through. Say to my soul, I am your salvation. Let them be put to shame and dishonor who seek after my life. Let them be turned back and disappointed who devise evil against me. Let them be like chaff before the wind. There's an image, kind of blowing chaff around, with the angel of the Lord driving them away. I like this one. Let their way be dark and slippery. They're walking around in the dark, slip and fall, and you broke your hip. With the angel of the Lord pursuing them. For without cause they hid their net from me. Without cause they dug a pit for my life. Let destruction come upon him when he does not know it. And let the net that he hid ensnare him. Let him fall into it to his own destruction. Now again, we could give lots of examples about it. Did you hear that? I mean, he's saying, I'm being mistreated, mistreat them back. He's coming to God with this. And it does create a dilemma if you're paying attention. And we can't study the Psalms without dealing headlong with this kind of interesting challenge. That on one hand, we're told to love our enemies, and on the other hand, these guys have us praying that we hope our enemy slips and falls or is run through by a spear, right? So what do you do with that? Well, one of the things, I'm going to give you a couple of resources today, and one of them, I can tell you, we've quoted C.S. Lewis in here a number of times, and C.S. Lewis, an Oxford scholar he wrote a book called The Reflections on the Psalms. He does a great job with this stuff, because he heads right into it. Lewis is a very honest writer, very intelligent one, but very honest writer. And I love what he says. He admits there is a dilemma, because he's not approving of the way these psalmists are praying. He's like, this is not good stuff necessarily. But what do we do with it? Because it is in the Bible, and we believe that God put that stuff there. And I love his quote. He says, where we find a difficulty, we may always expect that a discovery awaits us. Where we find a difficulty, we may always expect that a discovery awaits us. So what I'm hoping to do, and what I'm encouraging everybody to do when it comes to these things as you're grappling with the Bible, is look for the discovery. And I discovered a few things with Lewis' help and others' help along the way that I want to pass along to you of how do you deal with the imprecatory Psalms, and what do they have to shape our souls with. And the first one is this. Start with humility and sympathy. Start with humility and sympathy. When you read stuff like this and you see this guy's obviously upset and he's asking God, to take a sword and run his enemy through and this kind of thing, it's easy to kind of stand in our place and watch them and go, gosh, man, these guys are just, their kind of nerves are a little raw, aren't they? What are they, big babies? They can't handle a little bit of a challenge in life? It's very easy to do that. Always remember, the first law of interpreting the Bible is to go back and find out what the writer's world was really like and what he was trying to communicate and what he was experiencing, or she. Go back and look at what they were dealing with. Look at the history and feel what they felt first, and then apply it out. And when you do that, what happens is you have to at least have a little bit of sympathy and humility. Because he's talking about injustice. Now, guys, injustice is one of those things that does hurt us in our souls, and we've all experienced it. I mean, all of us have gone to middle school. I literally was cornered by 3 guys. I had the experience when I was in middle school, in a dark corner of a locker room where 3 guys cornered me and demanded my lunch money. I went through that, the injustice, We've all faced injustice, and it's hurt us deeply. But a lot of times ours are comparatively lightweight. Right now, I have an injustice going on where I'm in a battle with a credit card company. That's my big injustice that's happening. I think they did me wrong, and we're arguing back and forth. But I'm talking to a customer service agent, about this stuff. Back in those days, this is a brutal world. These guys, you're in a world where you're in a rural area, 3 hills away, there might be a gang of raping, pillaging, marauding barbarians who will choose to come to your house in the middle of the night and torch your house, burn it to the ground, put your kids in slavery, rape your wife right in front of you, and then gouge out your eyeballs. That kind of stuff happened. That's the kind of world they lived in. Last week, we talked about the writer, King David, of over 70 of the Psalms. His life, much of his life, was running from a man who literally wanted to kill him. And the running started whenever the king that wanted to kill him threw a spear at him. He literally dodged a spear and ran for his life. Now, when's the last time that happened to many of us? That's the kind of, contend with those who contend with me. I literally have someone chasing me down, right? We have to remember that. And we have to kind of get in tune before we, put judgment on these guys. I told an Afghanistan story last week. I got to tell you another one. But I remember very distinctly, as we do work in Afghanistan, there was one season where I spent a month there, and I took my whole family. And this was when my youngest kid was 6, and my oldest was 12. I had 3 children. I took my wife. And I prayed the Psalms like that when I was in Kabul. Now, Kabul's not nearly as dangerous as they show on the news, but it's a pretty dangerous place nonetheless. We have watched hotels and restaurants where we have spent time, and we've watched on the news where they've been blown up and people have gone in and shot people and stuff. That does go on. And I remember very distinctly praying through the Psalms when I was in Kabul, and those Psalms took on whole new meaning because it wasn't crazy to think that there might be someone just a few blocks away that's rigging up a car bomb as I'm praying and wants to put it in front of where we're staying. That's not unrealistic. As a matter of fact, just a few days after my family left, There was a huge riot in the city of Kabul, and the rioters went right down the main drag, just a few blocks from where we were staying, and were grabbing foreigners and beating them up and killing some of them, and they torched a restaurant we used to go to all the time. The Psalms like that feel different when you encounter that. We live in a violent world. We still do. Now, we don't deal with, in our middle class, Midwestern world, we don't deal with that kind of stuff that much. It's increasing with terrorism and everything. But we live in a world that's filled with violence, and there needs to be a place, as it were, where you can express these things. And even if you're not even doing it right, or even if you're hoping things that God's not gonna, he's not looking at you like, yeah, I'm gonna run this guy through with a sword, I'm on it. He wants you to have a place to express it. That's very important. I want to show you a couple of film clips just to kind of engage the conversation, because really what I would love is for groups and teams in our church to just sit and engage, wondering about these kinds of psalms. Now, the conversation you're going to watch is a short film produced by Fuller University. They're a Christian university out in California. And the story behind it is you're going to see an older man and you're going to see a younger guy. And the older man is Eugene Peterson. Eugene Peterson is the translator of a translation of the Bible called The Message. And it's written in very, very modern English. I'm going to read you a sample here in just a second. But Eugene Peterson translated the Bible in this very modern language. Well, the other person that you're going to see is Bono, lead singer of U2. And if you don't know who he is, it's hard to even imagine you're from our planet. But Bono's the lead singer, and he was interviewed in Rolling Stone magazine. And he quotes Eugene Peterson, and he talks about how much he loves the Message version, especially of the Psalms. And he made the comment that U2, before they go out to do their shows, they read the Psalms. They get those Psalms resonating in their hearts and minds before they go out and perform. Well, he says that, and one of Eugene Peterson's students comes to him and said, Bono quoted you and referenced you in a Rolling Stone magazine. And Eugene Peterson was like, who's Bono? He didn't know who Bono was either. But they finally got those two together, and they filmed a discussion about the Psalms. But before you watch it, I'm going to read you one of the Psalm 35 from The Message, and how Eugene Peterson sets this up. 35, same thing we read in a different translation a while ago. Harass these hecklers, God. Punch the bullies in the nose. Grab a weapon, anything at hand. Stand up for me. Get ready to throw a spear. Aim the javelin at the people who are out to get me. Reassure me. Let me hear you say, I'll save you. When those thugs try to knife me in the back, make them look foolish. Frustrate all those who are plotting my downfall. Make them lie like cinders in a high wind with God's angel working the bellows. Make their road lightless and mud slick with God's angel on their tails. Out of sheer cussedness, they set a trap to catch me. For no good reason, they dug a ditch to stop me. Surprise them with your ambush. Catch them in the very trap they set, the disaster they planned for me. Now, in this discussion, they're asked by the interviewer, what about the violence thing? And it's interesting, and I just want you to hear some food for thought from Bono and Eugene Peterson. Watch this.
What do we do with violence? Violence in our own hearts, the sense of wanting to do violence, and the violence in the world.
That's a hard question. We need to find a way to cuss without cussing. And the imprecatory Psalms surely do that. They just lay it out. And I think they're really important. If we've got to have some way in context, and the context is the whole Bible and the whole Psalter, some way in context to tell people how mad we are.
One of Eugene's translations, 35, punch the nose, is that 35? It's fantastic. And punch the nose of the bullies, God. But I love the idea of you've got to cuss, find a way of cussing without cussing, and you have to give vent to that. I like that. That's going to stay with me.
Do you have songs that have given some kind of expression, narrative, poetic, to violence, to this
Yes.
violence in us, violence in the world?
Yes. And it's called Raised by Wolves, the song. And I tried to make it real. tried to bring people to that place, because it must have had an effect on me, and I want to understand violence. A bombing that I missed in Dublin myself, 3 car bombs timed to go off at 5:30 on a Friday night in 1974. Any other time I would have been on the street where the bomb went off, because I used to travel through the city centre get 2 buses home from school. But there was a bus strike that day, and I took a bicycle. And I have no problem with the Old Testament. I don't see God as a violent God, but I think the world is a violent place, and it does reflect that. And it's a terrifying thing, some of the Old Testament, but it is real. And in a way, I kind of prefer it to the airy-fairy stuff where we don't get where we don't get real.
Is there a way to read the Psalms through Jesus' eyes that helps us understand violence or nonviolence?
Well, yeah, the crucifixion. Where there's violence, there's got to be some kind of response. And is it more violence or less? I'm glad we have crosses in every room in this house, but when I look at those, I don't think of decoration. I think of, this is the world we live in. And it's a world with a lot of crosses. And I just would like to spend my life doing something about that through scripture, through preaching, through friendship. And now my years are getting shorter and don't have nearly as many left. But I don't want to escape the violence.
Maybe, just maybe, because we do live in a violent world where car bombs go off, we need a place to cuss without cussing. We need to remember that our Savior, Christ, died a violent death. And violence surrounds us, and we need a place to deal with these things and process things. And this is a very important thing. The Psalms are God's breathing out, a way to express that. Does that make it okay? Not necessarily, but it does lead to at least a second thing before we kind of bring this to a sharp point. Not only have a little sympathy and humility because we do live in a violent world, and it's part of our reality. Well, when you look at the imprecatory Psalms, remember they teach us possibly how to hate well. How to hate well. And this is where C.S. Lewis, I referenced in his reflections, he talks about this because he doesn't approve of what they say all the time, but he does say there may be something underneath that the psalmist can teach us. Listen what he says. He says, though hideously distorted by the human instrument, the psalm writer, something of the divine voice can be heard in these passages. Not as if God, of course, looks upon their enemies as they do. The Bible says God does not desire the death of a sinner. But doubtless he has for the sin of those enemies just the implacable hostility which the poets express. Implacable, yes. Not to the sinner, but to the sin. It will not be tolerated. It will not be condoned. No treaty will be made with it. That tooth must come out. That right hand must be amputated if the man is to be saved. In other words, God really does hate evil. And whenever someone is close to him, they're going to experience to that. Here's another great resource on this. Interesting. The guy by the name of Henry Cloud. I've quoted him a number of times, clinical psychiatrist and a consultant, leadership consultant. And he wrote a book called 9 Things You Simply Must Do. And it was his observations of watching people in a psychiatric practice who were very well adjusted in their relationships and success in life and all that. And he said they all seem to have these 9 things in common that they do. And he's challenging everybody to do that. One of the 9 things, he says, is you need to hate well. What does he mean by that? Henry Cloud says this, quote, what we hate says a lot about who we are, what we value, what we care about. And how we hate says much about how we will succeed in love and life. In other words, hate is not wrong. Hating the wrong things is wrong. There's nothing admirable about an indifferent soul. There are things in this world that ought to be hated, and it's called evil. In the New Testament part of the Bible, listen what it says in Romans chapter 12, verse 9. It says, hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. You ought to be reacting against evil. And the psalmist, even though they may not always handle it right and everything, they looked about and they saw unfair treatment of the weak. And they said, God, do something about that. And they did it with these crude images, like run him through, do what I would do kind of stuff. And that's where they kind of go off the rails. But that sense of I hate what I just saw happening to someone or happening to me, and I know it was unjust, it's got a root of real stuff in there. A few years ago, there was a movie called 12 Years a Slave. I think it won Best Picture Oscar. And I finally got to see it. I didn't realize that it was based on a true story of an autobiography written pre-Civil War by an African-American gentleman who was free in the North, but he was kidnapped and put in slavery in the South. Well, I've read part of the autobiography, and the movie got it pretty accurate in a lot of things that he reported. And I'm telling you, you sit and watch that movie, and you think this stuff really happened in the world, especially a lot of times in the name of God, where people would be, slaves would be beaten. They show this one scene, and I know this happened historically, where a woman, a mother, was sold to one master and had to watch her kids get sold to another, knowing she would never see them again, and they would spend their entire lives in slavery. And the grief. Do you hate that? You better. You better hate racial prejudice and what it does to people, the arrogance that it inspires, the injustice, the cruelty that it inspires. What would you say about a young girl growing up in a third world country in abject poverty that's told, we could get you a job. We can get you a job where you'll clean floors and you'll make beds and you can make money for your family. But only to find out when she goes to that house that she's not paid a dime. And her house, the head of the house, takes an iron and burns her arms and burns her back and puts her into the slave trade. That story's a real story that we learned through doing work in Myanmar, where human trafficking is a major, major, major problem. That a girl we met, that's exactly what happened to her. It goes on now. Does that make you mad? Do you hate it? There's nothing admirable about an indifferent soul. We can be inspired to hate the right things. We should be loving the right things and hating the right things. And the psalmists bring that out before God and say, I hate what I see. I hate the injustice that I see. And then Henry Cloud goes on to draw a very important distinction, though. He said there's two kinds of hate. There is the wrong kind of hate, and it's called subjective hate. And then there's objective hate. He said objective hate, you can tell if your hate is the right thing and it's showing good character. What you're seeing is you will see inside yourself a desire and a motivation to change that injustice. He said subjective hate is just the kind of stuff where you're upset with life and you're upset with everybody and it's inside you. It's when you cut somebody off in traffic. I had a guy, I had cut him off in traffic, and there was this guy kind of parallel with, he chases me down and I can see him yelling at me through the window. And I stopped and I was like, you okay? You cut me off! You're right, I did, I'm sorry. I think there was a little bit of subjective hate going in there. No injustice happened. I apologized and he didn't know what to do with himself. That's the kind of hate that can destroy you. But the psalmists have boiling inside me sometimes, even though they may handle it wrong. They have the kind of hate for evil that we all ought to have if we're going to hate well. But still, what do we do? We're supposed to love our enemies and stuff. I'm going to give you an illustration that I've given you before, and I'm going to give you again before this series is over, because when I prayed through the Psalms, it was the number one lesson I learned about this kind of stuff. What we said, we quoted the great church father Athanasius a few weeks back when we introduced the Psalms. And Athanasius said, the beauty of the Psalms is that they give expression to all the movements of the human soul. In other words, and I'm just kind of put different human soul experiences here. We get sad, we get angry, we get excited. We can experience being peaceful, grieving, hopeful. We can be disillusioned, thankful, holy, or sinful. You cover all the ground. And I know most of us would never come out and say we do this, but imagine that in the middle, we'll let the G stand for God. Many of us, again, subconsciously maybe, kind of believe, especially in our American experience, that To get here, if we happen to be here, we first have to go here, and then we can go here. In other words, if I start angry, I've got to get peaceful. I've got to get rid of that anger before I get to God. Or say we're grieving, well, I've got to get hopeful, and then I can go to God. And the psalmists do this. The psalmists instruct us that no, starting with your anger, you can move towards him, and it gives you expression. Starting with your sinfulness. Most of us think that I'm sinful here, and I got to get holy, and then I can go here. You don't start there, but you can. That's what the psalmists do. They articulate. It doesn't make all these things right. It doesn't make it that they want to run through someone with a spear. But it does say, God, I've got an enemy out there and I don't understand this and I want them hurt. But here's what happens. When you turn towards God, his priorities start taking over. But you start right where you are. Jesus' main theme was the kingdom of God. And when he said, love your enemies and turn the other cheek and walk the extra mile, he was talking about the stuff of the kingdom of God. But here's what you need to know, and I need to know about the characteristic of the kingdom of God. The stuff of the kingdom of God requires God. In other words, if I'm angry, there's no way I'm ever going to love my enemy if I don't start there and just turn towards him. Loving my enemies, doing anything for God in the kingdom of God requires God. And so what I'm called to do is not, if I'm depressed or I'm down or I'm disillusioned or I'm grieving or I'm hurting, I'm not supposed to try to fix myself up and get myself nice and neat and clean and then go to him. The psalmists teach us, I'm going to start right here. I'm sad. I'm upset. I feel there's a sense of injustice. I've been cheated, but I'm talking to him about it. And most of us don't do that. And we don't do it in those words. And that reality makes all the difference in the world. And the imprecatory Psalms, if they don't do anything else, they teach us how to hate well. They teach us some humility in the real world. But they teach us to be honest. I'm going to show you one more clip of Eugene Peterson and Bono where they talk about this honesty thing. Listen carefully and let it kind of go down in your soul and shape you a little bit. Watch this.
I got started with this translating the Psalms by translating a psalm for a certain person, just a single person, to try to get them to realize that praying wasn't being nice before God. I would translate a psalm that I thought fit them. And the psalms are not pretty. They're not nice. And I would ask them, just pray this psalm using my translation. I think I'm doing it about as close to the Hebrew as I can get it. But it's not smooth. It's not nice. It's not pretty. But it's honest. And I think we're trying for honesty, which is very, very hard in our culture.
I'm talking about dishonesty. That I find a lot of in Christian art, a lot of dishonesty.
Yeah, right.
And I think it's a shame because these are people who are vulnerable to God in a good way. Vulnerable. I mean, porous, open. I would love if this conversation would inspire people who are writing these beautiful voices and writing these beautiful, say, gospel songs. Write a song about their bad marriage. Write a song about how they're, pissed off at the government. Because that's what God wants from you. That truth. The way, the truth. And that truthfulness, know the truth will set you free. It'll blow things apart. Why I'm suspicious of Christians is because of this lack of realism. And I'd love to see more of that in art and in life and in music.
The imprecatory Psalms teach us about honesty. They're not neat, they're not clean. I love Eugene Peterson saying the Psalms are not pretty. They're rough, they're hard, but they're honest. Wherever you are, start there. Sometimes that's the hardest place. If you're down, you're angry, you're hurting, you're grieving, you start there. But that turn to God is the hope that you have just by being truthful and hopeful. And He will give you His truth in return. And on that journey, He will shape you in to what He's called you to be. The call to honesty is a huge part of what these things are about. And I'm hoping and praying that all of us will be real in our relationship with God. Let's pray. Lord, thank you very much for the lessons that are sometimes challenging, sometimes strange for us or weird. Help us to be honest. Help us to start from right where we are and not to, have to fix ourselves up before you before we let you fix us. Help us with that. And Lord, use the Psalms and let our worship reflect that kind of realism and that kind of gutsy honesty. And you sort out all the places where it's not appropriate or not right or we're headed down the wrong direction, and so we can walk with you in full assurance of faith. In Jesus' name, amen.